Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, my God. It's big, so strong, so mighty. My God's plans for me goes beyond my wildest dreams. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do.
Welcome to Wellness Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain, and we are so excited because, why? There's nothing our God cannot do. He can do anything but fail. He is awesome. He has all power in his hands, and we do believe. And so we stand on God's word, the books of the Bible, and we trust him. Wellness, that's what it's all about. Wellness, that's what it's all about. Wellness issues, health of the mind, body, and spirit. So when we include the concept of wellness, obviously, we include the spirit. And what spirit are we talking about? The spirit of Christ. And that's what we believe. But in any event, we're talking about the issues of today. And obviously, the news is burning hot with so many different things going on from around the world. And I think we have just an awesome guest on today. She is Dr. Sharlene Sinegal DeCuir. She's assistant professor of history at Xavier University. She has her PhD and master's from LSU, and she has specialized focusing on the New South period of American history through the Civil Rights Movement, with particular interest on African American activism in Louisiana. Welcome, Dr. DeCuir. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Well, of course, it's always great, and we appreciate you so much. I'll just open the floor to you, just your thoughts on what's going on.
Well, there's a lot going on nationally, and first I would like to say that, I'm sure we're going to get to talk a lot about the church, what happened with the church, and also the symbols that we see around our great city of New Orleans and all throughout the United States of America, which provoke hate, racism, white supremacy, racial segregation, all those things. I think that in lieu of what happened with Dylan Roof killing these 9 innocent people at the church, that this is opening up a larger discussion to be had about racial issues across the United States, across the South, and what we should do about these issues.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I think that is a great starting point because in a historical context, I guess it's always surprising, but in a historical context, if we go back the past 500 years, are we just normally trending the way we've been?
Are we normally trending?
Just a trend, just the trend of church bombings and the level of, has it been really a big up or down in a level of groups, people that believe that folk of African descent, black African descent, aren't of the same, that we're different, of a different nature?
Well, I think that over the years, since slavery and even to this present day, that there are a certain select group of people, not all people have the same attitudes, but there's a certain select group of people who are who believe in white supremacy and the notions of white power, and those are the people who are spilling the hatred out into the United States. I mean, it's just like with any group of people, you have good people in all races. You have bad people in all races. So you can't just condemn the entire race for the acts of certain people.
Right.
But those ideas and notions of those certain people. Those are the bad apples. And, it's just really unfortunate that we have to worry about those bad seeds so much so than the good seeds, that the bad overshadows, the negative overshadows all of the good. So I think throughout history, you've seen these negative things erupt over time. We saw it in the 1800s. We saw it in the early 1900s. We saw it during the Civil Rights Movement. Again, it's just this group of bad seeds.
Well, and my statement then, though, is that slavery existed 400 years from a group of bad seed, because obviously there were, abolitionists, and, it wasn't all in literally doing slavery in and of itself. But slavery was the institution was able to be maintained, even though it was a bad seed. Now, Jim Crow, the institution was able to be maintained, with the power of the bad seed. And either the bad seed is that powerful, or the good seed and those oppressed have ignored what's going on. That's the balance that keeps playing out in my mind. How can this bad seed, how are they able to institutionalize a belief that black people can sing and dance but aren't good at flying airlines?
I think that really does have to do a lot with politics. It is because you have certain people who are placed in office, especially during, like I said, the 1800s, the early 1900s, when African Americans did not have the right to vote. So we did not have the right to influence the public policies. We did not have those rights. And so because of that, our voice got lost, and the voices of others were heard louder than the voices of, per se, integration, the voices of racial harmony. And so what you had was that come into the forefront because, again, the political rights, African Americans did not have them. And the political rights that whites did have, that did feel the same way with African Americans, that segregation was a good idea for America to move forward, that was not enough. Their voices were not heard enough. I think they were just overshadowed politically by probably more than likely the finances that the other group had, and just the fact that white group, for instance, the white primaries, there were all of these different ways to keep African Americans in that voice silenced.
And I think you hit the nail on the head, though. Then, so those who had the mic, so to speak, those who had the voice, were dominated by bad seed. So, and the economics of it, those who had the money controlled those who had the voice. So
exactly.
But that's why we were so.
Go ahead. The economic means to further the standpoint or the policies of integration, and we did not have that. No one had that. No one who was for those types of changes had the political power and the financial backing to push forward what they wanted, the racial harmony.
And that's why, I think the entire civil rights movement, and I forgot who it is, had an article today, an op-ed in a paper, that the civil rights movement, the genius of the civil rights movement was to take the high road, almost to trick the nation into believing that they had to respond in kind by allowing us to have the Civil Rights Act. In other words, if those who were preaching violence had taken control and people would have went at it in a violent way, then you would have never had the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, or whatever. But since the nonviolent movement went ahead and said, "I'm sorry," then you end up with the country was shamed into thinking that, well, let's allow them to vote and have the Voting Rights Act or whatever. That it's almost like a ruse And so the analogy was made till the day where in the church bombing, the congregants, are forgiving, the roof guy. And so therefore the response is, people talking about taking down the Confederate flags and monuments and so forth, because people took a high road. But to look at it that way, it's almost like it's a joke.
Well, I wouldn't say that forgiving is a joke, because, it's something that the African American community has always done. We have learned to forgive. If the African American community were not such forgiving people, who knows where this world would be? Because, you can't have one group who is harming another group and the other group would respond in kind, because then the world would be chaotic. There would be too much unrest. And so the African American community, like I said, we have a long history of forgiving, and that is because of our Christian faith. We have faith in a higher power, and we have faith that we know that if we forgive, if we show that side, that others will eventually, their heart and hearts will change. And so that's just kind of a history with African American and in the African American community of forgiving.
Well, the only go ahead.
And with the civil rights movement, we know that the nonviolent movement was especially a part of that. If Martin Luther King, if all of the different organizations hadn't adopted the nonviolent principles that they did, then when the dogs went in and, the dogs went in, the hoses went on, people were arrested and dragged throughout the streets, those things were shown on TV. Had those things not been shown on TV and had African Americans defended themselves and fought, it would have been a different civil rights movement. I don't think that the nation, I don't think that the world would have been able to get behind the cause of African Americans if they would have showed resistance in that.
But that brings us to the point, though, that, forgiveness, if it's expecting anything in return, is a joke. It's not real. That's not true. You know what I mean? That's where we go to the concept. So there's nothing wrong with forgiving, and it's always the right thing to do. But for it to be placed, and I'm going back, I forgot the guy who wrote it this morning, and even King's movie, it almost as if they were using forgiveness as a ruse to see if we can shame those people into doing the right thing. As if there's an ulterior motive to forgiveness, then the motives aren't Christian. You know what I mean? So forgiveness has to be purely from the heart, and, hey, we don't expect anything else in return. Hey, if you're evil, you just be evil. But my forgiveness has nothing to do with your being evil. So when we politicize forgiveness, and I think that's what we're looking at, looking at forgiveness in a political, as a political ploy, so to speak, then have we debased ourselves, to playing this game?
Yeah, I don't think that forgiveness would be a political ploy and that, we're expecting something in return. I think when the families of these victims forgive and when African American community forgive, we forgive wholeheartedly. I think that it's others that decide that they are going to, start to change their minds and their hearts. I don't think we're forgiving them into shame, but maybe it's the shame that they feel themselves and their need to start acting a different way. But I don't think that it's the African American community saying, we're going to forgive you, and now, oh my goodness, aren't you so ashamed of yourself? Now you have to do, what we say. I don't think it's that. I think it's that they, the others, they are the ones who have their own shame. Okay. And because of our forgiveness, they see themselves in the mirror and they are allowed to change.
Good deal. Now, I'm with you all the way around. So moving forward. So here we have this issue now with the flags and the symbols and so forth. And so I think that leads right to that. But historically, is this something new other than with the schools? I know Malcolm Suber, and I think we have to really give his group a lot of credit, in removing the names from the schools. And I don't think a lot of people understood it back then. And the issue then with the schools was people didn't know their history. So, you see social media blowing up and everything else like that. But are people that void of understanding history that they really miss what's going on?
I think so. I think a lot of people, they just don't think about it. It's the history. It's the past. They don't, whenever I go into my classes, a lot of students come in and they say, oh, I hate history. It's the past. Let's leave it there. But you have to understand it in order to move forward. And I think a lot of people, even people in the African-American community, they just tend to overlook those things and just move on with the day-to-day. But we have to know our history in order to move forward.
Okay. So historically, though, again, other than the schools, has there been a period in time where the focus has been on symbols? I guess coming out of slavery, in the African American community, the black community, I don't recall any time where the black community was concerned about the symbols themselves, but the white community, that's why they erected the monuments and the flags and everything else like that, because they understood the power of the symbols. Are we just now starting to understand the power of these symbols?
No, I think the African American community always understood the power of those symbols. I think that, again, we just did not have the voice to put forward our concerns about those symbols. We were not, strengthened politically, economically, and so on. We're at a different point in our lives, the African American community as a whole, to where now we're able to stand up and say, you know what, we need these things taken down. I mean, because if you think about it, the Confederate flag, that is a symbol that provokes hate. It is a symbol that provokes the Confederate notions of white supremacy, slavery, racism, all those things. And now, African Americans, we have a chance to say, you know what, this is not right. This glorifies all these negative images, and we need to have this taken down. And for sure, we do not need to have this symbol thrown in a place of honor above any state capitol in the United States of America. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Again, if you think about this flag and what it represents, it means that, the Civil War itself killed many, I think it was over 600,000 Americans. Okay, it is the bloodiest war with the most American lives lost. And so not only does this symbolize racism to African Americans, but it should symbolize loss. It should symbolize death. It should symbolize a moment where the United States was not a union. It should symbolize all those things to Americans as a whole, not just African Americans, but Americans as a whole. So why would you want to have that out in public for everyone to see? It should not be in a place of honor. It should be in a museum. I'm not saying, take down history, try to rewrite it or whitewash it or anything like that, but it should be placed in its historic content in a museum that celebrates the Civil War, or whatever it is, the Confederacy, or whatever you want to put it. But it needs to be in a museum and not up in prominence.
Okay,
that's what I think.
Obviously agreed. So, but all of the symbols. So therefore, and I guess, is it a good comparison? I've heard it used of Nazi. The Nazi symbols of Nazi Germany, where it's illegal to even have those symbols, placed anywhere around. Knowing that people would disagree, regardless of whether they have 7,000 commentators say that, hey, we disagree with that. There's such a thing as a higher right. There's a higher order. There's a righteousness that has to be above public opinion. Are we anywhere close to that point concerning these symbols? Like, regardless of what the voters say and the public opinion says that this is absolutely wrong to have General Robert E. Lee Beauregard, Jefferson Davis Parkway, and I mean, where these things just need to be abolished and wiped out completely and thrown in museums?
I personally think that they don't need to hold a prominent place in society. I mean, I do believe, like I said, it is a part of history, and I do believe that it needs to be in museums. And going back to the reference of the Nazi symbol, the Schwa sign, it provokes hate. It provokes all of those things to Jewish Americans that this flag provokes to African Americans in the African American community. And let's say, for instance, that flag was flying over the state capitol in South Carolina. How long do you think that would have lasted up there? Not even 2 minutes, I don't think. But you have this other flag that has that means the same thing to the African American community, and it's out there. It's ridiculous. The street names, the statues, and all those things. As I said, they are part of history. They cannot be erased, but some history needs to be left in the past. We teach those things in courses. It's not like America is going to just say, hey, the Civil War never happened, or we never had a General Lee, we never had a Jeff Davis. That's not going to happen. But for us, for Americans to be unified, for Americans to start moving towards the path of racial harmony, I do believe that those things need to be out of prominence. Now, I'm not saying, go and replace it with something else that might be offensive to another group. I think a discussion needs to be had about what needs to replace those names and those figures, those statues, and so on.
Well, and as a historian, and that I guess that goes to the question when you speak about the discussion. We're speaking about moral issues of a higher order. I mean, because when we're, on the low road, whoever has the most power wins. I mean, it is what it is. If it's the Nazis have more power, they win. But we're attempting to say that the community should operate at a higher moral level. And we're speaking about it, you and I as Christians, so we believe in the Bible. Okay. So, but everybody doesn't believe in the Bible. How does a society come together on what is humane and humanness? What is just righteousness, where all people are created equal, not blacks or 3/5? Is there anywhere in history where a heterogeneous society comes together to believe in one a truth of human rights? Does it exist?
Well, it's hard to say if that does exist. It should have existed. It should have existed with the Constitution of the United States of America, except for that one little clause that, African Americans were not going to be treated as equals. Had that not been in there, I think that, yes, it would have existed. But to say that, this harmony does exist, I would say in a utopian world, yes. But I believe that even though some people do not believe in the Bible or God, I do think they believe in a higher power. And whatever that higher power may be, I'm hoping that it does call for peace and justice and equality.
So let's just go to this issue with the right here in New Orleans. Literally, I think there are folk ready to go to war over that Robert E. Lee statue right there on Lee Circle, where the Mardi Gras place. They could, where again the bad seed, and I'll call it what it is. Either they're ignorant of history, or they're evil. You could pick which one. Some folk may not know the history, so they don't really understand that this depicts the enslavement of human beings and the degradation. Yeah, it really wasn't that long ago. Slavery existed, continued on to 47 or whatever. But the thing of it is that there are those that could care less about righteousness.
There are. There are those that could care less. I mean, it's America. You have the right to believe whatever you want to believe. But with that said, I think that our political leaders, they are the ones that's going to have to take the bulls by the horn and decide that this needs to be changed. You're going to have both groups. You're going to have two groups, a group that says, yes, take down the statue of Jeff Davis, and you're going to have another group that says, no, leave it up. It's our history. It's our heritage. But again, you have to do what's best for the community as a whole and what's best for New Orleans as a whole.
Okay. Which is good. Let's throw in now the church. Okay. And the belief that the church should have a vocal role, particularly the white church. I'm waiting and hoping to hear from the white church on this issue. But historically, the church has been, the Christian church has been on the wrong side concerning segregation and slavery.
I would say yes to a certain extent. That especially if you're talking, it depends on what church you're talking about. If you're talking about the Catholic Church, then yes, the Catholic Church has been on the wrong side. They were on the wrong side for a while, but I do believe they came to their senses, and that they are now in a place where they believe that racial harmony should be afforded to everyone. But in the past, yes, there were issues in the 40s and the 50s where the Catholic Church believed that there should be some segregation between the races.
Wow. Good information. So, are we at a turning point now? Because I hadn't heard anything out the church yet. It's pretty new. It was just announced, just the other day. The roof thing just happened. Again, why did it have to wait till this happened anyway? But still, it just happened. And so, is there a form by which the church can make its statement? No. To me, the churches should be all over the newspaper. Everybody saying, "Hey, look, take it down, take it down." It should not be a discussion of where the church stands today. If they had problems in the 40s and the 50s, and I'm not just singling out the Catholic Church, we ought not to be dealing with this again. It's like deja vu. Are we back at the same situation where the church is ambivalent, not sure where it needs to stand?
I think that this is one of the reasons why we have separation of church and state. That the church really does not want to get intertwined so much so in the affairs of the state, of what is going on right now. And I think that if push comes to shove, that you will see that the church, I believe that churches around New Orleans and in the nation, they're going to call for that racial justice and the racial harmony. And I do believe that they would think about what serves the best interest of all of Americans, not just whites and not just blacks.
I love it. I think you're right on it. Again, we're talking to Dr. Sharlene Sinegal DeCuir, professor of history at Xavier University. We just have a minute or two remaining. So as we move forward in this thing, and if we can just drop back at the church bombing and what had happened, you see a very strong similarity between this church bombing and the effect that it had when those young girls were killed, and it changed Martin Luther King's stance.
Yes, I believe the bombings of the 4 little girls and the shootings that happened in 2015 are similar, because what it is doing actually it's invoking conversation. It's invoking the African American community to take a look at themselves, and it's also taking the African American community to look at America as a whole, as well as the Caucasian community and everyone else, to look at the fact that the racial injustice are still there, to look at the fact that these symbols still have meaning to certain groups. And just to, end on this note, I know as a black person in the South, whenever I see someone riding around with a Confederate flag on their driver's license or hanging from their house, I get scared. I initially feel fearful, and I think that must be a racist person living in that house. That must be a racist person driving that car, and so on. So it's just to say that these symbols have power. Just like the cross. The cross has power. It is a symbol, and it invokes all of the things that's pure.
All
and
right.
then you have this flag, and to me, what it invokes and what I believe the African American community feel that it invokes.
We got to shut on out. Hey, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Remember, we're talking about mass incarceration, so that's the backdrop of everything.
Oh, my God, it's big, so strong, so mighty. My God's plans for me goes beyond